Switzerland is one of the few countries where hydrogen trucking has quietly crossed the line from concept to daily operation, and that alone makes it a valuable case study. Not because it proves hydrogen trucking will scale everywhere, but because it exposes a truth the industry often avoids. What matters most is not how many megawatts of electrolysis a country can announce, but how reliably hydrogen can be delivered to vehicles, day after day, under real operating conditions. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots show that capacity on paper and deliverability in practice are very different things. And confusing the two is one of the fastest ways hydrogen projects miss economic reality. Hydrogen trucking in Switzerland did not begin with a massive green hydrogen announcement or a gigawatt-scale electrolyzer ribbon cutting. It began with a logistics problem. Switzerland has a heavy freight sector, mountainous terrain, strict emissions expectations, and a strong political and industrial preference for pragmatic solutions. When hydrogen trucks appeared on Swiss roads, they were not introduced as marketing showcases, they were introduced as working vehicles. That distinction matters because it shifts the entire evaluation framework away from nameplate capacity and toward operational performance. The most widely referenced example is the Hyundai X-Skyant fuel cell truck fleet. These trucks have been operating in Switzerland since 2020 in commercial service, not pilot loops. They deliver goods, accumulate kilometers, refuel at real stations, and experience real downtime. Over time, the fleet has accumulated more than 10 million kilometers of operation. That number is not important because it sounds impressive, but because it implies something much more consequential. It implies repeatability. It implies uptime. It implies that hydrogen was available when the trucks needed it, often enough to justify continued operation. No hydrogen mobility system reaches that level of accumulated mileage unless hydrogen delivery works at least tolerably well. Each X-Skyant truck typically carries roughly 31 kilograms of hydrogen and achieves an operational range of around 400 kilometers, depending on duty cycle and load. Refueling takes minutes, not hours, which is one of hydrogen's strongest advantages for heavy freight. These are not theoretical performance metrics. They are drawn from vehicles that are refueled, driven, and maintained in real logistics chains. The importance of this is often overlooked. Too many hydrogen discussions remain anchored in design targets rather than delivered performance. Switzerland offers a counterexample grounded in use. But focusing only on the trucks misses the deeper lesson. The real story is not that hydrogen trucks can work. The real story is what it took to make them work at all. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking ecosystem did not scale by chasing maximum production capacity. It scaled by aligning production, storage, compression, transport, and refueling into a system that prioritized reliability over size. In other words, Switzerland treated hydrogen as a logistics problem first and an energy problem second. This is where the concept of deliverability becomes critical. Deliverability is not the same as capacity. Capacity tells you how much hydrogen could theoretically be produced under ideal conditions. Deliverability tells you how much hydrogen actually reaches the vehicle, at the right pressure, at the right time, at the right location. Most hydrogen projects fail in the gap between those two concepts. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots narrowed that gap instead of ignoring it. One reason Switzerland could do this is structural. The country has abundant hydropower and a relatively stable electricity system. That does not mean electricity is infinite or cheap, but it does mean that hydrogen production can be anchored to predictable supply rather than volatile grid conditions. Even so, Switzerland did not attempt to fuel hydrogen trucking through massive centralized electrolyzers feeding distant stations. Instead, hydrogen supply and refueling infrastructure were built incrementally, matching demand rather than anticipating it with oversized capacity. This approach contrasts sharply with how hydrogen projects are often marketed elsewhere. In many regions, hydrogen announcements lead with megawatts. A project is framed as significant because it is 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts or 1 gigawatt. But megawatts do not move trucks. Kilograms do. And kilograms only matter if they are delivered reliably. Switzerland's experience shows that a smaller, well-utilized hydrogen system can outperform a larger, poorly delivered one in terms of real decarbonization impact. Hydrogen refueling stations in Switzerland are not numerous compared to gasoline or electric charging infrastructure, but they are functional. They are placed where trucks actually operate. They are designed around throughput rather than publicity. Station availability, compression reliability, and pressure management become first-order constraints. When hydrogen is unavailable, trucks stop. That creates immediate economic feedback. There is no hiding behind future-scale promises when vehicles are waiting to refuel. This feedback loop is exactly what many hydrogen projects elsewhere lack. Projects are often insulated from operational reality during early phases because they are not tied to working fleets. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots were different. From the beginning, they were coupled to logistics operations that required predictable service. That forced infrastructure planners to think in terms of deliverability rather than potential. The importance of this becomes clearer when examining how hydrogen trucking pilots expand. Switzerland did not attempt to deploy hundreds of trucks before the infrastructure proved itself. The fleet grew gradually, allowing hydrogen supply systems to adapt. This pacing matters. Hydrogen is unforgiving to overbuild. Excess capacity that cannot be utilized quickly becomes an economic liability. Underutilized electrolyzers, compressors, or storage tanks quietly erode project economics long before headlines notice. This is where the phrase capacity versus deliverability stops being theoretical and becomes practical. A country can announce hydrogen capacity that looks impressive on a chart, but if that hydrogen cannot be delivered to end users consistently, the system fails economically even if it succeeds politically. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking pilots avoided this trap by scaling only when deliverability was demonstrated. Another important element is the role of partnerships. Hydrogen trucking in Switzerland involved coordinated efforts between vehicle manufacturers, logistics operators, station developers, and energy providers. This coordination reduced system friction. Trucks were not deployed where stations did not exist. Stations were not built where trucks would not operate. This seems obvious, but it is surprisingly rare in hydrogen development, where different parts of the value chain often move out of sync. The Swiss case also highlights something uncomfortable for hydrogen advocates. Hydrogen trucking works best when it is tightly scoped. It performs well on defined routes, predictable duty cycles, and known refueling points. Switzerland's freight geography supports this. Many hydrogen truck operations run on repeat corridors rather than highly variable routes. This does not diminish hydrogen's value, but it clarifies where it makes sense. Hydrogen is not a universal solution. It is a system solution for specific use cases where deliverability can be controlled. That insight matters for developers and investors. Too often, hydrogen trucking is presented as a general replacement for diesel without acknowledging the operational discipline required. Switzerland's pilots show that hydrogen can succeed, but only when system boundaries are respected. Trucks, stations, supply chains, and power sources must be aligned. Nameplate capacity alone cannot solve misalignment. Recent hydrogen truck pilots involving other manufacturers, including European truck makers, reinforce this lesson. These pilots are designed not to prove maximum range or peak performance, but to test how hydrogen trucks integrate into existing logistics networks. Questions about uptime, maintenance, hydrogen quality, and station throughput dominate evaluations. These are deliverability questions, not capacity questions. Another subtle but critical factor is time. Hydrogen systems are sensitive to temporal mismatches. Electricity availability, hydrogen production, storage cycles, and vehicle refueling demand must align in time as well as space. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking ecosystem benefited from predictable freight schedules, which made temporal alignment easier. In markets with more variable demand, deliverability becomes even harder. This temporal dimension is one reason why megawatt announcements can be misleading. A megawatt of electrolyzer capacity does not produce hydrogen uniformly over time. It depends on electricity availability, operating schedules, and maintenance. Deliverability depends on whether hydrogen production aligns with vehicle demand windows. Switzerland's pilots implicitly address this by operating within controlled logistics frameworks. The economic implications are profound. Hydrogen projects often model utilization optimistically, assuming steady operation and high capacity factors. Switzerland's experience suggests that utilization is earned, not assumed. It emerges from system reliability. When trucks can refuel reliably, utilization increases naturally. When they cannot, utilization collapses quickly. There is little middle ground. This is why Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots matter beyond national borders. They provide a reality check for hydrogen strategies built primarily around capacity expansion. They show that successful hydrogen deployment requires attention to the unglamorous details of logistics, maintenance, scheduling, and integration. These details rarely appear in press releases, but they determine outcomes. For policymakers, the lesson is uncomfortable but necessary. Supporting hydrogen trucking is not just about funding electrolyzers or vehicles. It is about supporting integrated systems that deliver hydrogen where and when it is needed. Subsidies that reward capacity without regard to utilization risk creating stranded assets. Switzerland's approach implicitly favored utilization by linking infrastructure development to real demand. For developers, the lesson is equally clear. Hydrogen projects should be designed from the point of use backward, not from production outward. Start with the truck route. Start with refueling frequency. Start with downtime tolerance. Then design hydrogen supply accordingly. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking pilots followed this logic, whether explicitly or implicitly. For investors, Switzerland offers a rare dataset grounded in operation rather than aspiration. 10 million kilometers of hydrogen trucking do not guarantee profitability, but they do demonstrate system viability. They reduce uncertainty around deliverability, which is one of the hardest risks to price. Projects elsewhere that lack this operational grounding should be treated with caution, regardless of their advertised capacity. This brings us to the broader system lesson. Hydrogen is often framed as an energy transition challenge. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots show that it is equally a systems engineering challenge. Energy flows must be synchronized with material flows, vehicle flows, and time constraints. Megawatts alone cannot solve that. Capacity still matters, of course. Without sufficient hydrogen production, deliverability eventually fails. But Switzerland's experience shows that capacity should follow deliverability, not lead it. Build what can be used. Expand when utilization proves demand. Resist the temptation to overbuild for headlines. The phrase nameplate megawatts has become a proxy for ambition in hydrogen discussions. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking pilots quietly challenge that proxy. They suggest a different metric of success: kilometers driven, minutes to refuel, station uptime. These are less glamorous metrics, but they are far more honest. As hydrogen trucking expands into other regions, Switzerland's experience should be studied carefully, not romanticized. The country's success rests on specific conditions: geography, infrastructure discipline, coordinated actors, and restrained scaling. These conditions are not universal, but the underlying lesson applies everywhere. Hydrogen systems succeed when deliverability is treated as the core design constraint. This is especially relevant as hydrogen projects grow larger. As scale increases, deliverability becomes harder, not easier. Larger systems introduce more points of failure. Transmission constraints, storage losses, compression bottlenecks, and scheduling conflicts multiply. Switzerland's hydrogen trucking pilots benefited from being small enough to manage these risks. Scaling without addressing deliverability will amplify them. This is why capacity announcements should always be interrogated. Ask where the hydrogen will go. Ask when it will be delivered. Ask how often it will be used. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots can answer those questions because they are already operating. Many other projects cannot. The final takeaway is not that Switzerland has solved hydrogen trucking. It has not. Costs remain high. Infrastructure is limited. Scaling challenges persist. But Switzerland has demonstrated something more valuable than perfection. It has demonstrated realism. By prioritizing deliverability over nameplate capacity, it has produced one of the most credible hydrogen trucking case studies in the world. As hydrogen debates intensify globally, Switzerland's experience offers a grounding reference point. It reminds us that hydrogen transitions are not won on slides or in press releases. They are won on roads, at stations, under real operating constraints. Capacity matters, but deliverability decides. If you are evaluating hydrogen trucking projects, whether as a developer, policymaker, or investor, this is the lens that matters. Do not ask how big the electrolyzer is. Ask whether the truck can refuel tomorrow. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots show why that question is the one that ultimately decides success. At this point in the discussion, this is where Renee Energy points viewers to H2 Hub. Not as a promotion, but as a resource where hydrogen projects are examined through real system constraints. Where deliverability, utilization, and execution realities are treated as first-order variables. If you are serious about understanding why hydrogen projects succeed or fail, this is the level of analysis required. Hydrogen's future will not be decided by megawatts alone. It will be decided by whether hydrogen shows up when the system demands it. Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots prove that lesson in motion.